For 45 years, Ivan Petrov had lived in the same remote village, tucked between endless forest and a black, stagnant marsh that locals avoided even in daylight. When he first came here as a young man, the place had been alive, children running across dusty roads, smoke rising from chimneys, dogs barking behind every fence. Now only 6 houses remained inhabited. The rest stood hollow and broken, windows staring like blind eyes into the wind. People left quietly over the years. Some moved to the city for work. Others simply disappeared into better lives. Ivan stayed. He told himself it was stubbornness, but in truth, he no longer knew how to live anywhere else. He rarely spoke to anyone except Galina, the middle-aged shopkeeper who ran the only store still open. Their conversations were brief and practical. Bread, salt, kerosene, batteries. Sometimes she would try to stretch the silence with gossip, but Ivan never lingered. He preferred the quiet. The forest had become his companion. He hunted small game, fished in the narrow river that fed the marsh, and chopped wood for long winters. The silence suited him. It pressed gently against his ears like cotton. Then one evening in late autumn, as orange light bled through the skeletal trees, he noticed a dog standing near his fence. It was thin, brown, with intelligent dark eyes. Not a village dog, too clean, too calm. It didn't bark or growl. It simply watched him. Well, Ivan muttered, breaking a piece of bread. He added a slice of salted pork fat and tossed it onto the ground. The dog approached cautiously, sniffed, then ate. It wagged its tail once, slowly, thoughtfully, as if deciding something important. "You can stay if you want," Ivan said. The dog stayed. He named him Bobik. It was a simple name, common and warm. Within days, Bobik followed him everywhere, into the forest, down to the river, even into the shed where Ivan repaired traps. The dog learned quickly. Too quickly. When Ivan pointed at a trail, Bobik tracked without hesitation. When he whispered, the dog obeyed instantly. It was as if Bobik understood not just commands, but intentions. At night, the dog lay by the stove, watching the dark corners of the room more often than sleeping. Once, Ivan woke to see Bobik standing rigid, staring at the door. The air felt heavy. The dog's ears were flattened, and a low growl trembled in his throat. But when Ivan opened the door, there was nothing outside. Only the distant marsh, breathing in the cold night. Winter crept in slowly, stretching thin fingers of frost across the village. The remaining houses stood farther apart than Ivan remembered, as if the emptiness between them had grown wider with each passing year. Smoke rose from only 3 chimneys now. The rest were cold. Bobik became Ivan's shadow. They hunted together in the pale mornings when the forest glittered with frozen dew. The dog moved with unnatural precision, never stepping on dry branches, never losing a trail. Sometimes Ivan felt that. Bobik knew where the prey would be before they even entered the woods. The dog would pause, head tilted slightly, then change direction without hesitation, and always there would be tracks. "You're smarter than most men I've known," Ivan would mutter. Bobik would glance back at him, eyes reflecting something almost human. The river began to freeze. The marsh, however, never did. Even in the coldest nights, faint ripples disturbed its black surface. Ivan avoided looking at it for too long. Old villagers used to say the marsh had no bottom, that it swallowed more than water. One afternoon, while they walked deeper into the forest than usual, Bobik suddenly stopped. His body stiffened. The air felt wrong, thicker, damp despite the frost. A faint smell drifted through the trees, something sour and metallic. "Bobik!" Ivan whispered. Without warning, the dog bolted. He ran straight into the thicket, branches snapping violently as he disappeared into the dense undergrowth. "Bobik!" Ivan shouted, heart pounding. He chased after him, stumbling over roots and frozen mud. The forest seemed to close behind him, swallowing the path. He caught glimpses of brown fur between trees, then nothing. Silence fell abruptly. Too abruptly. Ivan stood still, listening. No barking. No movement. Only the distant creak of trees shifting in the wind. "Enough," he called. "Come back." Nothing answered. He searched until dusk painted the sky in bruised purple. His breath turned to fog, his boots soaked through with melting frost. He circled the area again and again, calling the dog's name until his throat burned. But Bobik did not return. That evening, Ivan left the door open and placed fresh bread by the stove. He sat in his chair, waiting. The wind scraped against the walls. The forest groaned softly. Once, he thought he heard distant barking, but it was too far, too distorted. Midnight came. Bobik never returned. For the first time in years, Ivan felt the weight of the silence pressing harder than usual. And somewhere beyond the trees, near the marsh, something moved. Ivan did not sleep that night. He sat by the window, lantern burning low, eyes fixed on the dark line of the forest. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind made his heart jump. Once, he was certain he saw movement near the fence, a low shape slipping through the shadows. But when he stepped outside with the lantern, the yard stood empty and still. At dawn, he went into the forest again. The frost had melted into damp earth. The ground was soft, holding footprints clearly. He found his own tracks from the previous day, and beside them, Bobik's paw prints. They led deep into the trees. Ivan followed. The forest seemed different now. Quieter. No birds. No distant cracking of branches from deer. Only a thick, listening silence. The tracks moved toward the marsh. Ivan's chest tightened. He rarely approached that part of the woods. The trees there grew twisted and bare, even in summer. The air carried a sour scent, like stagnant water mixed with something rotting. Bobik's paw prints became erratic near the edge of the marsh, as if he had run in circles. Ivan called again. His voice sounded small. There were other marks in the mud. Not paw prints. Long grooves, like something heavy had been dragged across the wet ground. And deeper indentations, almost like hooves, but too wide, too uneven. Ivan knelt down to examine them. The mud was still fresh. He stood slowly. Bobik. He whispered. The marsh bubbled softly. He searched the area until his legs trembled from exhaustion. He pushed through reeds, called into hollow tree trunks, walked along the murky shoreline. Once, he thought he heard a faint whine, but it dissolved into the wind. As evening approached, he returned home alone. For the next several days, he searched again and again. He visited the remaining neighbors. Old Mikhail shook his head. The young couple near the road hadn't seen anything. Galina from the shop frowned and suggested wolves. But wolves did not leave hoof-like marks. A week passed. The bread by the stove grew stale. The house felt larger and colder without the quiet breathing near the fire. Ivan stopped leaving the door open. He stopped calling the dog's name aloud. Finally, on the 7th night, he forced himself to accept it. The forest had taken Bobik, and the forest never gave anything back. A week after he stopped searching, the scratching began. It was late evening. The wind pressed against the walls, carrying the smell of wet earth. Ivan sat at the table, cleaning his old hunting knife, trying not to think about the empty space near the stove. Then came the sound. Slow, deliberate, scrape. Ivan froze. It came again, from the window. He stood carefully and lifted the lantern. The flame trembled as he approached the glass. For a moment, he saw only his own reflection, pale face, hollow eyes. Then something shifted outside. Two dark shapes blinked in the light. Bobik. The dog stood by the door. Mud covered his fur in thick, crusted layers. His ribs showed sharply beneath his skin. He looked smaller somehow, reduced, as if something had drained him. Ivan rushed outside. "Where have you been?" He breathed, kneeling. Bobik did not wag his tail. He stared. Up close, Ivan noticed a black patch on the dog's neck. It wasn't dirt. It looked like a stain beneath the skin itself, dark and spreading, as though ink had seeped into flesh. He reached out to touch it. Bobik flinched violently and let out a low, warning growl. Ivan pulled his hand back slowly. "It's me," he said softly. The dog blinked, but there was no recognition. Inside the house, Bobik refused food at first. When he finally ate, he chewed slowly, mechanically, as if remembering how. He did not lie by the stove. Instead, he sat facing the corner of the room, staring into the shadow where the light did not reach. All night, Ivan heard quiet sounds, not barking, not whining. Soft clicking noises, like teeth tapping together. By morning, The black patch on Bobik's neck looked larger. Ivan tried to wash it with warm water and soap. It did not fade. Under the fur, the skin felt swollen and hot. When Ivan pressed gently, something shifted beneath, soft and wrong. Bobik snapped at him. Not playfully. With intent. Ivan stumbled back, heart racing. The dog's lips peeled back, revealing gums darker than they should have been. And for a split second, Ivan felt certain that whatever had returned from the forest was not the dog he had lost. The change grew worse with each passing day. Bobik stopped going outside. When Ivan opened the door, the dog backed away, ears flat, eyes wide with something close to panic. He no longer followed Ivan through the yard or into the forest. Instead, he paced the house at night, claws clicking softly against the wooden floor. The black patch on his neck spread downward, crawling like spilled ink beneath the skin. The fur around it began to fall out. A sour, metallic smell filled the room. Ivan tried to convince himself it was infection. A wound. Something natural. But wounds did not pulse. On the third night after Bobik's return, Ivan woke to a wet sound. A tearing sound. He grabbed the lantern and turned toward the stove. Bobik was scratching at his own neck. Not with panic, with focus. His claws dug into the blackened flesh, peeling fur and skin away in ragged strips. Beneath it, Ivan saw something that made his stomach twist. It wasn't blood. It was dark, thick matter, moving slightly, as if alive. Stop! Ivan shouted. Bobik turned his head slowly. His eyes caught the lantern light. They were not the same eyes. There was no confusion in them now. No loyalty. Only something deep and watching. Ivan backed toward the wall. The dog rose unsteadily to his feet, growling low. The sound vibrated strangely, layered, almost doubled, as if another throat echoed beneath it. Ivan understood then. This thing had come from the marsh, and he had let it into his house. By morning, he made his decision. He wrapped a rope loosely around Bobik's neck. The dog did not resist. He walked beside Ivan, head lowered, as if he already knew where they were going. The forest felt heavier than before. The air damp. The trees seemed closer together. When they reached the edge of the marsh, Ivan noticed something that made his blood run cold. Under a fallen tree nearby lay bones, small, scattered, and tangled in the mud, a collar. Bobik's collar. Ivan approached slowly. The skeleton was nearly rotted away. Bits of fur still clinging to grey fragments of flesh. This body had been here for days. Weeks. Ivan's hands began to shake. He looked at the dog standing beside him. Then back at the corpse. The rope slipped from his fingers. And somewhere behind him, something began to breathe. Ivan could not move. The bones beneath the fallen tree were unmistakable. The cracked skull, the narrow ribs, the rusted metal ring of the collar half buried in mud, all of it belonged to Bobik. His Bobik. The body had been here long enough to rot, long enough for the forest to begin reclaiming it. Slowly, Ivan turned his head. The dog standing beside him was still there, silent, watching. Its breathing sounded wrong, too deep, too steady. The rope lay between them in the mud. This isn't possible. Ivan whispered. A branch snapped behind him. He spun around, heart hammering. Nothing but twisted trees and grey sky. When he looked back toward the fallen tree, the dog was gone. Only the bones remained. Ivan stumbled backward, nearly slipping into the marsh. His boots sank into thick mud. Panic rose in his chest like cold water. Then he saw it. Through the thin trunks of the trees, a brown shape moved. Bobik. He stood several meters away, partially hidden behind a tree. His head tilted slightly, just like before, when he used to listen for prey. "Come here," Ivan croaked. The dog did not move. Instead, he slowly stepped backward behind the tree and disappeared. Ivan rushed forward, pushing through branches, ignoring the sucking pull of mud beneath his feet. He reached the tree. Nothing. No tracks. No sound. Only the distant bubbling of the marsh. He turned in circles, disoriented. The forest no longer looked familiar. The path back to the village was gone. The sky above had darkened faster than it should have. "Ivan," he muttered to himself. Calm down. But his voice sounded foreign in the thick air. His legs felt heavy. Each step sank deeper into wet ground. The trees here were bare, bark peeling like old skin. Water glistened between their roots. He had walked straight into the marshland without realizing it. A splash echoed nearby. Then another. Ivan froze. From the black water, something broke the surface. First, a pair of curved shapes. Horns. Long and twisted, coated in algae. Then a pale human head rose slowly between them. Strands of dark hair hanging over hollow eyes. Its skin was slick with mud. Lips parted slightly as if breathing for the first time in years. Ivan's lantern slipped from his hand and fell into the muck. Darkness swallowed him. The creature dragged itself upward. Shoulders emerging, covered in reeds and slime. Its arms were long, too long, fingers ending in broken nails. Ivan tried to step back. His foot caught on a root. He fell hard onto his back, breath knocked from his lungs. The creature tilted its head. And from somewhere behind it, a familiar bark echoed. Short, sharp. Bobik stood at the edge of the marsh, and the thing with horns reached out, gently, and began to stroke the dog's head. Ivan's mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Bobik stood calmly beside the creature, tail low but not tucked, as if waiting for approval. The horned figure's long fingers slid slowly through the dog's muddy fur. Its touch was almost tender. The creature's head turned toward Ivan. Its eyes were not fully human. They were pale and filmed over, yet focused directly on him. Its lips stretched into something resembling a smile, though the skin cracked slightly as it moved. Ivan forced himself to crawl backward, palms sinking into cold mud. His heart pounded so loudly he thought it might burst. "Bobik," he whispered hoarsely. "Come." The dog's ears twitched. For a moment, just a moment, Ivan thought he saw hesitation. Then the creature leaned closer to the dog's ear and made a sound. Not words. A wet, layered murmur, like water moving through a hollow log. Bobik's posture changed instantly. His body stiffened. His head lowered. A low growl rolled from his throat. The same doubled. Unnatural vibration Ivan had heard in the house. The creature began pulling itself further from the marsh. Mud slid from its shoulders in thick sheets. Its torso was thin, almost skeletal, but stretched unnaturally long. Black water dripped from its fingers. Ivan scrambled to his feet and turned. He ran. Branches whipped against his face. Roots grabbed at his boots. Behind him, he heard splashing, then the rapid pounding of paws. The barking began. Loud. Close. Too close. Ivan did not look back. He reached a large oak tree and collided with it, grabbing the trunk to steady himself. His chest burned. His vision blurred. The forest seemed endless now, twisted, unfamiliar. The sky had turned the color of bruised iron. The barking stopped abruptly. Silence crashed down. Ivan pressed his back against the tree, shaking. A slow crunch of footsteps echoed somewhere behind him. Then another. He turned his head slightly. Between the trees, he saw Bobik standing alone. No creature. No horns. The dog stared at him in complete stillness. Its head tilted once more. And in the fading light, Ivan noticed something new. A faint black stain had appeared on his own trouser leg, right above the ankle, spreading. Ivan didn't remember how he found the path back. One moment he was standing among the twisted trees, staring at the dark stain creeping across his leg. The next he was stumbling through the edge of the village as dawn bled weak, grey light over the rooftops. The barking had stopped. Bobik was gone. Again. Ivan didn't look back at the forest. He locked his door behind him and sat heavily on the floor, pulling up his trouser leg with trembling fingers. The black mark was real. It clung to his skin just above the ankle, shaped like a spreading bruise, but darker, deeper than any color he had ever seen. The skin around it felt cold, almost numb. He pressed a finger against it. No pain. But beneath the surface, something pulsed faintly. Ivan jerked his hand away. He did not sleep. When morning fully arrived, he walked to the well near the edge of the village. The air felt strange, heavy with something unsaid. Old Anna was already there, fiddling with a small portable radio, turning the dial slowly as static hissed between broken signals. "You're up early," she said without looking at him. I couldn't sleep. She glanced up then, and her eyes narrowed. You went to the marsh. It wasn't a question. Ivan swallowed. I found something. Anna stepped closer. Her gaze dropped to his leg. She didn't gasp, didn't look surprised. She simply nodded once. You let it follow you home, she said quietly. Ivan felt the ground tilt slightly beneath him. What? You brought it back. When the dog returned. Her voice remained calm. The forest doesn't give back what it takes. Not whole. Ivan's throat went dry. Anna leaned on the well and spoke as if telling a memory. I had a cat once. 15 years ago. She ran into the trees and didn't come back. 2 days later she scratched at my door. I let her in. She paused. She wasn't my cat anymore. Ivan stared at her. What did you do? Anna's eyes drifted toward the distant church cross, barely visible beyond the trees. I didn't act fast enough. Static crackled loudly from the radio. Anna reached out suddenly and grabbed Ivan's wrist. You still have time, she whispered. Go to the church. Light a candle. Don't return to the marsh. And whatever calls you from the forest. She squeezed tighter. Don't answer. Ivan glanced back toward the tree line. For a brief second, between the trunks, he thought he saw horns. Ivan didn't argue. He walked quickly toward the small village church, each step making the black stain on his ankle seem heavier, more real. The morning air was sharp, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and decay from the distant marsh. Every shadow along the path seemed to twist, stretching toward him. The church door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, dust hung in shafts of pale light from the high windows. The pews were empty. Silence pressed down like a living thing. He moved toward the altar. His hand shook as he struck a match, lighting a single candle and placing it carefully in the holder. The flame flickered, dancing across the worn wooden walls. As he stood, he felt it, a weight in the room. The air thickened. The hairs on the back of his neck stood. His eyes darted to the corners of the church, half expecting to see the horned creature from the marsh stepping silently toward him. The black stain on his leg seemed to pulse. A faint warmth spread through his skin. He could feel it trying to climb higher. Ivan closed his eyes, whispering a prayer he didn't remember learning. Words he barely understood slipped through trembling lips. The candlelight danced over the walls, casting strange, waving shadows. Then, slowly, the darkness inside him began to recede. The stain on his leg faded slightly, like ink washing away in water. Each heartbeat seemed to pull it lower, smaller. A soft, almost imperceptible sound made him freeze. A bark. Quiet. Familiar. He opened his eyes. The church was empty. Bobik was not there. Ivan realized the dog was gone, for good this time. Only the memory of mud, black fur, and that dreadful presence from the marsh remained. He sank into a pew, exhausted. The candle burned steadily, no longer flickering. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but the marsh seemed distant, held back by the protective walls of the church. By the time Ivan left, the black stain on his leg had disappeared almost entirely. His step felt lighter, the chill of fear retreating from his chest. He walked back to his house slowly, cautiously, avoiding the path closest to the marsh. Each step was deliberate. The forest remained still. When he reached home, he looked at the empty space near the stove. The silence was calm now, almost comforting. On the refrigerator, a single photograph remained, Bobik, sitting obediently by his side, ears perked, eyes bright. Ivan touched the photo gently. A memory of loyalty. A reminder. But nothing more. The marsh remained behind, and the forest kept its secrets. He would never return. And in that quiet, for the first time in years, Ivan felt safe. The following weeks passed quietly. The village remained mostly empty, its few residents keeping to themselves. Smoke still rose from chimneys, but the sound of life was faint, measured, and careful. Ivan went about his routines, chopping wood, fetching water, repairing traps, but he never ventured near the marsh or the forest's edge. The photograph of Bobik stayed on the refrigerator. Each morning, Ivan glanced at it, tracing the outline of the dog's ears with his finger. the memory of the forest, the marsh, the black stain, and the haunted creature lingered like a shadow at the edges of his mind. He did not speak of it to anyone. Words could not capture the weight of what had occurred, and he had learned that some things were safer unspoken. Occasionally, at night, he thought he heard soft scratching at the window or a faint bark carried by the wind. His heart would pound, and he would remind himself it was nothing, the wind, the trees, the imagination of a lonely man. Old Anna came by twice, bringing supplies and checking on him. She would glance at the photograph and nod, never mentioning Bobik's return from the forest. They shared a quiet understanding. Some things, once touched by the forest, could not be spoken aloud. The black stain never returned. Ivan's ankle healed completely, though he sometimes felt a faint tingling if he stepped too close to the old marsh path. It was a subtle warning, a memory of what had been, and of what could still be. Life resumed its slow rhythm. Ivan continued his hunting and fishing, and the forest became just forest again. Dangerous, yes, but not alive in the same way it had been during those terrifying nights. He avoided the woods bordering the marsh entirely, taking longer, winding paths to keep distance from the place that had held something unholy. Sometimes, at dusk, he would pause at the edge of the village and stare at the distant marsh. Mist rose over it like a living curtain, and for a fleeting moment, he could swear he saw a shadow moving just beneath the surface. A pair of glowing eyes, horns brushing the water. But then the mist shifted, and it was gone. Bobik remained a memory, a photograph, and nothing more. Ivan never returned to the forest, never sought the marsh again. The village, quiet and dwindling, became his world. And though fear lingered like a cold draft in the corners of his small house, he had learned the only way to survive the forest's dark gifts was to stay away. And so, life went on, slow, careful, haunted only by memory, and the shadow of a dog that once was, and perhaps, in some way, still was, just beyond the edge of the marsh.